Teenager, like around 13 or 14, one of my mates from school lived in a kind of countryside area. It's hard to describe. We lived in the suburbs, but his area was a little further out and less suburban looking at the time. This was 25 years ago. I have no idea what it looks like now, by the way. I went to his place to stay from time to time because there was always adventures to be had around his place. One day, he mentions that there are caves near his house, old mine shafts to be more precise. They were in a kind of national park. I was super interested to go check them out with him, so we planned to go the following weekend. And I'd stay over the night before, and we'd set out early the next morning. The weekend came around and we set out around 8 a.m. We went to the supermarket on the way to stock up on drinks and snacks and made our way to the caves. The national park was huge and beautiful. It was a great morning for a hike too. Not too hot and not too cold, with a nice blue-skied sunny day. We came to our first cave in the first 20 minutes of hiking. We grabbed our torches, or flashlights, and went in. It was only short, ending in a small chamber. At the far end of the chamber was a sturdy, locked cage-type gate. My friend told me that some were locked off due to the very real chance of cave-ins or flooding. Since it wasn't too long and it wasn't too dark, with a small amount of sunlight coming in from the entryway, we took a break and ate some snacks. It was good being out and about. I was never a fan of early mornings, but this was an exception. We resumed our trip after that short break and came across several more similar caves. There were a few longer ones with evidence of people using them for underage drinking, candles and beer cans, coupled with shitty teenage graffiti. But these were an exception and not too bad. For the most part, people seemed to respect the caves to an extent and cleaned up after themselves. After about an hour and a half, we came across one that was a bit different from the others. It was a longer one, but evidence of people using it for anything was minimal. I was too embarrassed to say so at the time, but I got a really weird feeling when we entered it. It was weird because we had been in so many, and I felt nothing. But this one just made me feel uneasy. I looked at my mate, and he seemed fine, so I didn't say anything, not wanting to appear soft. When we got to the end where the metal gate was, we found that it was unlocked and open. In fact, when we got closer, the wind seemed to blow it open slightly, although I didn't feel any wind. I got a chill up my spine, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. It was like it was inviting us in. Without hesitating, my mate was like, "What do you think we'll find?" My friend whispered to me. "Dunno," I managed to mumble out. Unease was really starting to hit me now, to the point that I was beginning to feel nauseous. And then, it got worse. I felt wind start to blow around my ankles. At first I paid it no mind, but then I thought, where is this sudden wind coming from? The temperature seemed to get colder at each step too. Then I felt the wind brush past my shoulder and face. My heart was beating so hard that I imagined it was echoing in the tunnel. Then I started hearing whispering all around me. It was faint and hard to work out the words. I stopped dead in my tracks and listened. When I stopped, it too seemed to stop. And then the most bone-chilling sound I'd ever heard could be heard in the distance in front of us. Low at first, but definitely loud in no time. It was the bellowing scream of a man. One at first, but then I could make out multiple voices. I felt hands start to grab at me, and I could take it no more. I took off in a sprint back towards the exit. I could only half see the way because the hand that I was holding my flashlight with was pumping up and down as it does when you sprint. I scraped my arms, legs, and shoulders against the rough rock walls several times, but I didn't care. It felt like I was running endlessly, but eventually I reached the gate, which I collided into. I thought it would be open still, but for some reason, it was shut. In my panic, I couldn't seem to work out how to open it. Eventually I managed, and it swung towards me, and I left, my mate not far behind me. We finally got out and just kept running, until we finally realized that we were out of that tunnel. Upon realizing this, we collapsed in an exhausted heap, struggling to regain our breath. I'm not proud of this, but I also vomited on myself, due to the overexertion. It was my only shirt for that weekend too, and I had to borrow one of my mates, while we cleaned mine up in secret, because for some reason we thought we'd be in trouble. Just before we got up and left the area where we collapsed, I took one look back at the cave. It was kinda involuntary. I wasn't even thinking. When my eyes landed on that cave entrance, I swear, I could see a shadowy figure standing in the darkness, staring at us. I shot a look at my friend and he saw it too. I was this close to puking again, but I held it down. We got up and hurriedly left the area. That was enough adventure for one day. We went back there a year or so later for nostalgia's sake. Also, we felt bigger and tougher. That particular cave was heavily locked off with no trespassing signs on it, threatening hefty fines. Probably for the best thinking back. Teenage bravado makes young boys do stupid things sometimes, and we may not have escaped so easily a second time.
Winter nights are always dark and creepy each year. If someone asks my personal opinion, I would always say that I don't like the winter season. The cold breeze and the dark, creepy, lonely roads. Also, something very bad happened to someone I know that shook me from head to toe. That incident left a fear in my heart that remains active even now. Like always, this time again, the mist started getting deeper, and there was a silence all around. Jason was well aware of what was going to happen next, but still don't know due to this fear his heart started beating fast. Along with the mist, the cold also started increasing, and Jason started shivering. It seemed that the whole world was covered with a white snowy sheet. Suddenly, a black shadow appeared in the middle of the fog, which slowly started moving toward Jason. Even knowing that there was no danger to him, Jason wanted to turn around and run away, but he felt that his feet were frozen there. The shadow came near Jason, and his face was clearly visible. It was the same face he had seen for the first time on that unforgettable night. He had the innocent face of an about 14-year-old boy. He pointed his finger toward him. Jason sweated profusely out of fear despite the cold. The boy accused him that you hit me and you're responsible for my death. You will have to atone for this. You will have to pay the price for my death. Jason began to reply and wanted to object that he didn't do anything, but as usual, the boy disappeared into the mist before he could say anything. Jason was shocked and his body was wet with sweat. He knew that now he would not be able to sleep for hours. He also knew that he would never forget that night. After that day, these dreadful dreams became a usual routine for Jason. The day when this incident happened was a great day for Jason. He was at a party that he organized by his boss and all the staff members were there. The hall was packed. The party was going on very loudly. People were dancing to foreign music, but nothing could be heard properly due to the noise of conversation. The wine was flowing like water. Standing in a corner, Jason was watching the spectacle without any special interest. Jason's friend Jack came up to him and tried to hand him a glass of wine to drink and come dance and enjoy with him and others. But Jason was not in the mood after that incident. At first, he tried to ignore Jack as he was already drunk and was not in a condition to understand anything. He kept on refusing, but Jack didn't agree. Finally, being fed up with all this forcing, Jason reluctantly took the glass. But he drank only a little to show Jack that he was drinking, which had almost no effect on him. Slowly, the night was over, and Jason went to the parking to his car. He pulled out his car from the hotel parking and drove towards his house. There was a slight fog, but the road was clearly visible. He was driving a little faster than usual since the road was not too crowded. After driving for a few minutes, he reached a traffic light where he saw the light turn green at the intersection in front of him, so he didn't reduce the speed. Suddenly, a boy started crossing the road right in front of him while talking on his cell phone. Jason pressed the brake pedal hard, but by then, it was too late. The car hit the boy, and he was thrown a few meters ahead due to the impact. Jason stopped the car and ran to the boy. He looked at his face carefully. His eyes were closed, and he seemed unconscious. Jason picked him up and put him in the car and went toward the nearest hospital. But then it dawned on him that if he confessed and the police found alcohol on his breath, he might have to go to jail. Thinking that Jason stopped the car some distance from the emergency ward of the hospital and picked up the young man inside, he handed over the boy to a ward boy there, he said, and ran away from there after saying that he would return after a few minutes. The next day, he read in the inside corner of the newspaper that some unknown person had left the body of a half-dead boy in the hospital and then disappeared from there. After that day, he started having hazy dreams. Jason lived with his widowed mother. The little change that took place in his everyday life because of these dreams he could not hide from his mother's eyes. But whenever she asked any questions in this matter, Jason used to avoid the matter. Jason was 24 years old and was working in a reputed company. His mother wanted him to get married as soon as possible to get a companion for her to talk with in her lonely time. But Jason was not thinking of getting married after that accident. The only thing he could think of that used to come to his mind again and again was that he had killed someone by his carelessness. To forget his fault, Jason started working day and night. During the day, his attention was distracted in his office, but at night, especially after having a foggy dream, he was overwhelmed with sadness. After that party night, he never touched alcohol and stopped serving alcohol even at company parties. Somehow, 6 months passed after the incident, and a new girl joined Jason's office. Her name was Alice, and she had come to work straight after her graduation. In other words, she was a fresher, and Jason was entrusted with the responsibility of making Alice understand her work. She was very intelligent and also had the enthusiasm to learn. Jason was very happy with his dedication. Gradually, Jason started getting attracted to Alice, and he started feeling that Alice could become an ideal life partner for him, but he couldn't let Alice know about his feelings all day. After a few days, Jason got a chance to have tea with Alice. It was announced in his office that the next day in the evening, the roads would be closed to a big procession in the city, so there would be a holiday in the office 2 hours earlier. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Jason informed Alice that the next day he would accompany Alice to her house. The next evening, at 4 o'clock when he got to leave, Jason took Alice and went towards her house. On the way, he tried to get information about Alice from her. While talking about her family, Alice revealed that she had a brother who died in an accident last year and almost broke while talking about her dead brother. Jason felt as if he had scratched an old wound and apologized to her. Soon, they reached Alice's house. Her parents welcomed him in a nice and respectful manner. Her father had retired from the British Army after serving for almost 35 years. Sitting in the meeting, he and Jason started talking about the upcoming elections and some other political issues. Alice and her mother went inside and started arranging tea and some snacks. Jason's eyes were wandering here and there while talking, and suddenly, he got a big jolt and was shocked when he saw his left side. There was a big picture on the front wall on which a garland was lying. Actually, it was the same boy who came under Jason's car. He was shocked even then. He asked Alice's father who was in that photo. Her father became completely silent, and then he replied in a broken voice that he was his only son who died in an accident last year. Jason's head started spinning, and his eyes almost burst with tears. He started thinking that he killed Alice's brother. He was the one who took their only hope from them, and he was thinking of getting married to her sister. Though he didn't know about all that from start even then, murder was murder. He had killed that boy and he was sure of it, but he didn't have the courage to confess so. Like before, he excused them that he had urgent work to do at home and left from there as soon as he could. After that, he started to avoid Alice even during office. He was feeling guilty about killing his brother, so he wanted to keep his distance from her. They went on for almost about 1 month, but then Alice got fed up with his behavior and asked him directly if he had some problem with her. She was furious due to Jason's ignorance and behavior. Jason thought that he couldn't hide this fact anymore from her and decided to confess to her about everything. He asked her to sit beside her and told her that he wanted to confess something. He told her that he did something that couldn't be forgiven no matter how he repented. She couldn't understand what he was trying to say, so she asked her to tell her everything clearly. Jason looked at her face and asked, "Do you know how your brother died?" He was hoping that she wasn't aware of anything, but she replied that she knew all about it. He was shocked to listen to her reply. Before he could say or ask anything else, she said that her brother had gone for a swim immediately after lunch. Suddenly, his stomach started twitching in the pool and he died by drowning. His friends and the lifeguard present there tried hard to save him, but perhaps the time had come for his death. Jason was shocked to hear this. He wasn't expecting something like that. He asked Alice if her father told him that her brother died in an accident. After this, Alice told him that just a week back, he had come in a way of a car while busy talking on his cell phone. But it seemed that some decent person was driving the car, because even though it was not his fault, he took my brother to the hospital and then disappeared. He was saved in that accident, but died after just 6 days in the swimming pool. Jason felt as if a mountain had lifted from his head. At this time, he thought that he had killed that boy, but actually the boy was saved that day, and these 6 months that passed like a hell for Jason were for nothing but a misunderstanding. He was very happy to know the truth. He confessed to Alice that he was the one who hit his brother that day with car and left him at the hospital, as he was scared of getting arrested. He also told her that he left her house that day because he saw her brother's photo and thought it was him who killed him. He burst into tears while confessing all this. Alice held him and hugged him tightly. She told him that everything was just a misunderstanding and asked him to forget everything. After a few minutes, she confessed to him her feelings towards him, and Jason also confessed to her about his feelings. Just after that, in his mind, he promised himself that the very next day he would go to Alice's house and meet her parents and ask for Alice's hand. And he was sure that after that day, he would never have that dreadful dream again. After this, both of them got married and lived their life happily without any tensions or worries.
This experience I'm going to describe has taken a while for me to get together and actually write down. It takes place in Yosemite National Park in August of 2017 with my two best friends, Zach and Andrew. Zach had worked that summer as a parking agent at Glacier Point and was pretty familiar with the area. His employee housing, he was given a house in Wawona with 2 other guys. Andrew and I were visiting for the week and had each been to Yosemite before. One of the nights there, we decided to watch the sun set over Chilnuwana Falls. It was a great hike that Zach had done before. The trail was about 4 miles to the top with about a 2,000-foot elevation gain. We brought food and decided to hike up and take a swim in each of the pools on top of the falls. We set out on a couple of hours before sunset. As we approached the top portion, we were about half a mile to the top of the falls where a guy, about our age, early 20s, ran up to us from bushes, frantically asking for help. His friend had fallen 50 feet off of a cliff and had shattered his femur. Zach was used to this, and after working in the park all summer, he had seen many injuries and was used to it. The man didn't have cell reception, but I did, so I called 911 and reported the accident, requesting search and rescue. After a few minutes, we decided that we wanted to continue the hike after search and rescue assured us that they would be there soon with the helicopter. We told the guy that help was on its way, and we continued the next half-mile up to the top of the falls. When we got up there, it was a picture-perfect scene, a beautiful sunset as we swam and ate. We then got an amazing show as we saw the helicopter land to pick up the injured guy that we had just encountered right below us. I'm a private pilot and Air Force aviator, so I loved every second of watching the helicopter land on the mountainside. After the sunset, we began the hike down and passed the spot with the injured guy, and search and rescue was taking care of him. We had a brief encounter with them. They thanked us for calling it in, and it was now dark out and we continued the hike down. There wasn't much moonlight and it was pretty dark, so we used our phones as flashlights to see the trail. And this is where the story gets interesting. The top of the hike was switchbacks with a steep incline on the right and a steep decline on the left with shrubs and trees. It was definitely too steep to hike down, hence the switchbacks. And about 1 mile into the hike, Zach was in front with a light and I was second, also shining my light, and Andrew was in the back. Zach was shining his light ahead and saw something sticking out from behind a tree that was about 15 feet ahead, just off to the right of the path, and instinctively shined his light on it. That's when whatever it was revealed itself from behind the tree and ran across the path, down to the left and down the steep grade. It ran on 2 feet and resembled some sort of humanoid figure. It was a little shorter than us and clearly had 2 arms and 2 legs, but it moved in an inhuman way. It vaguely resembled a person with a head and limbs, but appeared to be just skin, no clothes at all. All 3 of us saw it and we froze in our tracks. We continued shining the light where it had run, down the left side of the mountain, but we didn't see anything after it disappeared. We were absolutely terrified, none of us really knowing what to say because we had no idea what we had just witnessed. The worst part was that we still had another 3-mile hike ahead of us, plus another 1.5 miles from the trailhead to Zach's house, all while knowing that this creature could be stalking us close by. Luckily, we made it to his house, terrified and exhausted, but unharmed. Whatever it was must have been just as scared of us as we were of it. My question is, has anyone else had a similar experience in that area? I've done some research and my best guess would be a skinwalker, but it didn't try to lure us into the forest with it. We had another strange experience a couple of years later in Tioga Pass, right outside the Tioga gate of the park. We were camping in a closed campground in that area, and in the middle of the night, I woke up to go to the bathroom, and before exiting the tent, I saw an orb about 5 feet away, floating by with a bright light. I don't think it was a person because Zach, Andrew, and I all saw the orb, and there wasn't anyone around us. Our friend Jackson, who was also in the tent, told us that the next morning that he had felt rocks being thrown at the tent all night, along with hearing footsteps nearby. Has anyone else ever had these similar strange experiences? I'd love to hear them. We all know what we saw, and we know that it wasn't human.
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
From 1998 to 2001, I lived in a small craftsman-style home in Laurel Mountains, not too far from Frank Lloyd Wright's Falling Water. The home had a twin next door that was built at the same time, but by the time we bought our place, the one next door had been remodeled and expanded so extensively that it was unrecognizable. The story goes that the property belonged to 2 brothers, and the brother whose house ended up getting a makeover had 2 sons. But here's the fishy part, which I personally don't buy. Our neighbor in the other house told us that the 2 boys were werewolves. I didn't know this part of the story until my husband told me later on, after we both had experienced some strange things, which I will elaborate in a moment. When he told my husband about this, he invited him in for a tour of his home. And during the tour, he pulled back the carpet to show my husband a stone pentagram, which was built into the slate of the foyer and the floor. Another fact that was not related to me until later. A month or so passed and we got a really sweet rescue dog, a Sheltie, and she was perfectly friendly, normal, and protective over my 7-year-old daughter. But over the following months, she started doing some strange things. I get up in the middle of the night to find her growling down the stairs at something. And during the day, as I was watching TV or something in my studio, I'm an artist, she would stand between me and the door to the dining room and growl for an inordinate amount of time. Over the months, she began to get a little unpredictable too. She would wet on the carpet, which she had never done up to that point, and eventually she would bite me. By that point, I was pregnant and scared to have a biting dog around a baby, so I took her to the ASPCA. During my pregnancy, I started sleeping in another room away from my husband as he snored like a freight train, and it was hard enough to get rest being big and pregnant. When one night, I woke to something crawling up from the foot end of the bed and over my feet and legs. I couldn't see anything now and was so terrified that I couldn't even scream. I was able to put a hand up and grab the headboard. This was an old, rickety double bed that my mother-in-law had given us for our spare room, and slammed it against the wall repeatedly. With that noise, I was finally able to scream, and whatever was on my legs disappeared. I ran to the hall to find my husband running to meet me and asking me what had happened, and I didn't know what to say. That winter, a few months after the baby was born, I was sleeping in the room with the baby who was in his crib, and my mother was visiting. We'd all be enjoying an evening in front of the fireplace, and the whole house was warm and toasty. When we went to the bed late at night, probably around midnight, I woke at 2 a.m. to the baby screaming, and when I tried to get up, I was so ice cold, I could barely move. My mom and husband heard the baby screaming and came into the room to see what was wrong. Then my husband said, "Why the hell is it so cold in here?" The door was open the whole time, by the way. So my mom took the baby out of the room and my husband helped me out to the hallway beyond the open door, and the rest of the house was still toasty warm. Thank God we ended up moving out the following summer. But before we had, my husband said he'd spoken to the neighbor about our experiences, and he said, "Oh yeah, the 2 werewolf boys' father had killed them, and then himself, and the boys' ghosts roam the 2 properties."
No matter how much I wish it wasn't, this story is completely true. I wasn't drunk and I wasn't high on any drugs. Neither was my friend, but I fear his state of mind might have been permanently altered due to his experience with these beings. Secondly, I like to consider myself a rational, thinking type of person with years of experience hunting and hiking around my hometown in Wyoming. I've seen all kinds of fauna and flora, so I didn't confuse what I saw for something entirely different. It all started when I went to a friend's house to celebrate his birthday. He was turning 18, and I was already 18 myself. His uncle, a man more native to the land than myself, was 27. Let's call this friend James. I finally got to his house at about 4 p.m. that night. It was January 25th. Since he effectively lived in the middle of nowhere and at the foothills of the Rockies, I was keen on bringing something with me in case I ran into some trouble, like a bear or something of the like. So I brought along with me a .357 Magnum and some binoculars in case my friend wanted to try and hunt some coyotes with this .223 rifle. We started doing our normal routine for most of the day, playing games on his computer, watching some TV, and just chilling out and talking about school. His parents were away on a business trip to a nearby town, so they left James and his uncle the house to themselves. The thing that James loved the most in the world was easily his dogs. He had 2 chocolate labs and a golden retriever. The retriever was actually fairly old. This being Wyoming and people not really giving a hoot, the dogs were left out all day. They came and went as they pleased back to his house. Sometime around 8 or 9 p.m., we heard his dogs begin barking at something off in the distance. At this point, the sun was long gone, but the full moon gave an amazing amount of light. I looked through the nearby window in the direction of the dogs barking. Even with the moon shining against the snow, I could not see anything up to the tree line that was nearly a mile away. "There's nothing there," I said. "Are you sure? They don't even bark at deer anymore," James whispered to me. The whole situation was weird. Fast forward an hour, and his dogs have not been heard or seen since the barking started. His uncle was buzzed and watching something on their huge TV. James was beginning to worry that something happened to his dogs. Now, wolves can still be dangerous in the Rockies, and they have no problem taking down a random dog that wanders into the woods. This is the moment where I started to get anxious, partly because he wanted to get his dog back, and partly because wolves sometimes kill sheep or even cows. So if they were desperate, I'm sure they would have no problem with us. Even still, those dogs were his family. So we grabbed our guns and we headed outside. We were armed with heavy clothing, as well as my .357, the binoculars, and his .223 rifle. We braced ourselves and we headed out into the Wyoming winter with temperatures 20 below freezing, going the direction of where we last saw his dogs. The whole time we walked toward the tree line, my veins were being flooded with adrenaline, the same feeling I got every time I hunted, but tonight we definitely weren't hunters. We were about 300 yards away from the tree line when James suddenly stopped. With my eyes trained on the ground and looking for signs of an animal, I almost ran into him. He just stared at the tree line. He kept whispering for me to look at the trees. Slowly, he raised his left index finger towards the foothills of the mountains. As soon as he knew I was looking towards the trees, he readied his rifle and pointed it towards them. I noticed at this point that his breathing was extremely rapid and raspy, like he just witnessed a fatal car crash right in front of him. At that point, I honestly didn't know what he was talking about. I scanned the tree line over and over. I crouched down to sit on the snow. I used the binoculars towards where he pointed. It took me about 30 seconds, but eventually I saw what scared the hell out of him. There was something out there, and it wasn't human, and it wasn't his dogs. Something on 4 legs came out from behind a tree at the edge of the forest. It must have been about 3 feet tall at the shoulder. Of course, at first I assumed it was a wolf, or maybe even a small bear. A few seconds later, several more of these things came out of the woods. I didn't pause to try and count them, but there was at least 6 or 7, and who knows how many more were hiding in the trees still. We watched them slowly walk out of the trees for several minutes. These animals seemed strangely cautious or slow for whatever reason. Maybe they were scared of people. Then they eventually stopped as a howl from a dog or wolf came out from behind us. It was far enough away for us to not worry about it, but close enough for the unknown animals out there to hear the howl as well. I looked back through the binoculars and could almost make out the general texture of these creatures. They were now about 275 yards away. They looked pale and thin. They still appeared to be something like wolves or even large dogs, but my heart began to race when I saw what they did next. These things, whatever they were, picked up their pace fast, reaching speeds of what looked like 15 to 20 miles per hour, judging from how fast they closed their distance to the direction of the howl. And coincidentally, this was almost right at us. After a minute or so, James lost it and tried to get up to run away. I grabbed him and threw him on the ground as he started to run, but this caught the attention of the beasts, and they stopped. James and I, frozen with fear, sat down in the snow, weapons ready. I almost lost it as well when I noticed that the eyes of these things reflected the moonlight. They were orange in color. They didn't really glow like in some stories of cryptids. They were more piercing. We stared at them, and they stared back at us for what seemed like hours, until one of these creatures stood up on its back legs. At this moment, all of my knowledge on hunting and animals was meaningless. I knew that some animals could stand up on their back legs, but they could never do it very long. I audibly counted to see how long it stayed like that. 5 seconds, 10, 15. Then James screamed and pointed his .223 to the right. I looked in his direction, and I saw a creature on the left side of the group begin to get up, and it ran away from the pack. Dumbfounded, I turned my attention to the rest of them, and I told James to keep watching the one that ran away. I do a quick count of the ones that remained, the ones that were staring us down. There were only 4. My heart pounded out of my chest. There was no way we could have lost something so large on these plains. They're completely flat and covered in snow. I looked to our left, and then I saw it. It was crouched down and trying not to be seen. I realized how smart these things were, much smarter than I would have ever expected. These things, they were flanking us. I whispered to James my suspicions of what's going on, and he had the same thought. I made up a quick plan in my head, and I relayed it to James, our best course of action. I told him to start backing away slowly, but to always maintain eye contact. As soon as I finished telling him my idea, I do another quick count. Now only 3 pairs of orange eyes. Another one went somewhere. The one that first stood was starting to walk towards us. I helped James up, and I told him to keep an eye on our right side, while I looked to the left. We backed away, but these beasts walked with us, maintaining their distance the whole time. Eventually, we were only about 100 yards from his house before we turned and ran to his front door. We booked it towards his porch lights, no longer caring to be coy about the situation. Foolishly, I stopped 50 feet short of the porch, and I turned around. Maybe it was curiosity. I don't know, but I regretted it the moment I did it. My body seized up the moment I saw it. Those creatures stopped as soon as I made eye contact. With the creatures ever so slightly illuminated by the porch lights, I realized that these things seemed otherworldly. They were tall, probably 6 or 7 feet, and they were insanely thin and lanky, almost like a basketball player. They were so pale, and they stared right back with these intense orange eyes from before. I just looked back, less afraid but more curious, and a few seconds later, James screamed, "What are you doing?" I pulled myself out of the weird trance I found myself in, and I sprinted towards his house. I jumped inside and bolted the door, all while his drunk uncle swore at us for making too much noise. I looked out of the windows with my gun in hand, but I didn't see a thing. Nothing but fresh tracks. I pulled the curtains back where they were, and we heard the strangest noise, anything other than a person I've ever heard. It sounded like a dog's howl, but it repeated, almost like it was coming from a Siamang gibbon, in repeated pulses in different pitches and tones. The uncle looked like he instantly sobered up after hearing it, and he started locking all the doors and windows in the house. To our surprise, all of James's dogs were back, but they were very frightened and confused, cowering in a corner. We watched through the windows for almost the entire night, until I eventually needed to fall asleep, but we never had any other problems since. Whatever these things were, they were fast, they were smart, and they were nothing I've ever seen before. It looked like some strange dog man straight from tribal legend. I'm not a superstitious type of guy, but I hope it was somehow just a really elaborate dream, even if my friend and his uncle can recall the night too.